So, thank you very much. Wonderful. We would also like to bid you a very warm welcome. Good morning, everyone. In this first session of the morning, we want to make sure you get all ready for the day. We want to start with the sort of keynotes that we've started with in recent years. It's become a bit of a tradition. I don't know how many of you were there last year. My colleague, Mr. Ben Schrebeck, talked about the risks, cyber risks and hotels in more basic terms. And now our idea for this year was to say, well, wouldn't it be a good thing if we were to be able to demonstrate some things in real time? That's why we had this idea to have a live demo for hacking. And that's what we're going to present to you. We've prepared a few things. We want to show you how this works live online. We've prepared some videos as well, and I hope it's going to be an exciting presentation for you. We don't want to just frighten you. We'd like to give you some background information as well. And that's Dr. Florian Kohlar, my colleague. He is a cryptographer. In other words, he is somebody who really knows about encrypting and decrypting data. And I am Stefan Hölzner. I'm in charge of the technical security team at KPMG Germany. Right, why are we here today? So, well, why are we here? KPMG is one of the leading security consulting companies in Germany with more than 120 people employed here dealing exclusively with cyber security. In other words, how companies can protect themselves against cyber attacks by hackers. Please allow me very briefly to do a bit of advertising for our company. When we're looking at security, security deals with technical matters, organizational matters. And as far as the technology is concerned, you have to imagine all those things that our chair has mentioned in her introduction. So we're basically the good guys, the white witches, but we know the dark side of the force as well. So companies are attacked by us, acting as hackers. So we try to break in and get the crown jewels. The purpose of this is that we enable companies, that's our intention, to take measures to counteract such attacks. Now, these analysis of IT security is something which is very topical, and we do such analyses for all sorts of different systems for smartphones, and we're going to give you some examples of that kind later. We do it for ordinary IT systems, or we also do it for IT where you don't normally expect IT, like in industrial control units, to give you one example. I don't know whether you followed developments over the last few weeks and months. This trend for greater digitization is definitely continuing in production, where many of the units are IT controlled these days. You could see it from the media that in recent months, a steelworks in North Rhine-Westphalia became a victim to hackers because the hackers tweaked the IT so much that the whole plant had to be closed down for a time. Apart from that, we're helping companies to set up safeguards and security organizations. And the question is, how can I introduce security measures into the processes that a company has? And the other thing is, how can I make it possible for members of staff to properly understand and internalize security concerns? We're doing awareness measures, and that's very similar to what we're doing here today. Well, those of you who were here last year have probably asked yourselves, cybersecurity and hospitality, why should we care? My colleague Bernd Strebeck last year gave you one example from Marriott hotels, which was basically about hackers stealing data from credit cards. So just imagine you're the guest spending some time in a hotel. In the evening, you go to the hotel bar or to the restaurant, and afterwards you use your credit card to pay. How does it normally work? Well, the waiter will come sooner or later with a little credit card reader, will ask you to enter the card, and you will enter your PIN. So you do it. And the hacker managed to make sure that the credit card readers actually contain malware. And the malware, yes, that malware allowed me to use my credit card for payment, but actually all the credit card data were copied at the same time, plus forwarded to the hackers. And they merrily used my credit card data to do some internet shopping. Now, this was in early 2014, and the same hotel chain wrote sort of headlines again in the autumn of 2014 because it found out that their web page also had some weak points. Just looking at that form and what's been blacked out, you can see that. It's a typical reservation form on the website where you enter your name, your address, your email address, and your telephone number. Now, some clever people have found out that if you don't really enter your name, address, email address, postal address, whatever, but a number of characters, that web application manages not to make a booking, but, for example, to take customer data from the database and show it to you. Now, you can ask yourself, how on earth is that possible? How can a reservation form be used to obtain data pertaining to other customers? And that's the first point we would like to show you live. How is it that hackers work in order to get a web application to do the sort of things that they shouldn't be doing in the first place? Now, among hackers, the whole subject is what they call an SQL injection. Now, I can put your mind at rest. The first example we have is the most technical thing we're going to demonstrate today. So once you've sort of managed it through that, it'll get easier. Now, how do you imagine this? Well, for lay people, I'd like to explain it like this. Just imagine you've got this web application. There's a certain program routine behind it, and that waits for users to input something. So let's say we've prepared a sort of hotel shop, and our colleague is going to show it and demonstrate what we're doing. Say you're moving around in a web shop trying to buy presents, say. And you tell the web shop, Ryan, please show me all presents from 2015. It's a pretty simple thing. So you get all the ideas that shop would promote to you from 2015 for gifts to buy. And the hackers do, they modify all these different queries, and it's turned into, show me all the customer data from 2013, 2014, 2015. And how that works live is what my colleague is going to show you now. Right, a belated hi and good morning, everyone. I stood there so you could see me because the rest of the presentations I'm going to spend it hunched behind a screen. So as my colleague just said, we start with the SQL injection. So what we've prepared isn't a real web shop, but it is something you will find with exactly the same setup online. So we have remodeled it because we didn't want to get genuine customer data out after all, but this is an example which comes from real life, as it were. Before I start, let me point out that we will try to make sure that everything we are going to talk to you about will be accompanied by a live demo, which means we'll have to go online and try various things that we don't know in advance whether they really work the way we've tested it out. It did work in previous days, so worst case we've prepared a few videos to show you as well, but this is my disclaimer basically. It's all live and has all the pros and cons that are normal. So let's start. This is a hotel web shop. As I said, we've simplified it a bit. It doesn't look all that brilliant, but it's got what one needs. It's got this sort of book where the guests can enter their names, their email addresses, write a comment. You can see what they've got for sale in this web shop. And obviously, directly, we won't be able to get customer data. Maybe we're registered already, so what do we do? Well, we've got a little search field. In that search field, you can enter things that you want to buy. Not money. Money is always a good thing, of course. And, well, actually, this little search area doesn't help us much. But what happens in the background if I enter money or anything? The server hosting this web page will take that entry I've put in, go to a database and see whether I've put in can be found in their database because it is a command which is executed. I don't want to make it more complex. The whole point is we will try to break out of that field for input we see here. In other words, we want to go to the source code of the program which is behind that particular field. What do you normally do? Well, there are certain characters that computers will evaluate, like the apostrophe, and then there is a mistake. A computer has analyzed it somehow and ended up somehow, somewhere here in the source code. You see some parts of the source code a bit difficult to read, so let me enlarge it. Actually makes it more difficult. Don't worry, this is the only technical part. It's going to get a little more complex. So let's try some other combinations. Let's try to put not a hashtag, because I don't want to give a message, just a commentary here, typical for the source code, to use that for commentary purposes. What you see here is the whole command that comes behind it. It looks a bit weird, but what it means is that the server takes that query term you've put in, goes to ItemDB, a database, and according to the name, it will have all the items that you can purchase, and it will find a number, a description, and a price. Now, we want to exploit that in order to get out customer data. Now, the first thing we notice is there is an ItemDB. In other words, it's a database with all the items. So let's do some smart guessing. In reality, you'll have to try this out, but we are clever. We say, right, if there is an ItemDB, there must be a UserDB as well. So we will try somehow, when we're entering our query, to put that in such a way that we get to the user database. So let's try to combine the command, take any sort of search term, end the command, and what we'll do now is we link it with a second command. In other words, we do another selection. So look for money, and get us a database from that UserDB. I promise you it exists and it's called like that. In real time, you'd have to do a bit of trial and error here. But let's see what happened. Another cryptical error message, but anybody who knows is saying that basically what we tried is right, but we've given the wrong number of columns. In other words, our command wasn't complete the way we sent it, but in general terms, it would have worked. So we take the same command again, and I just put a few more sort of columns in it, 1, 2, 3, 4. In real life, again, that would have been a trial and error approach. It is 4 columns, and we've seen how something has happened. Doesn't look brilliant. Doesn't look as if this would help us further at all, but we learn from that is that the user database exists and we can read entries from it. Now, we don't want 1, 2, 3, 4. What we would like to see is a username, and a password would be brilliant, or best case, everything. So I just replace 1 and 2 here. Probably, again, that would be trial and error. I put in email and password. Password was misspelled, right? Can happen. Typo. Do it like this, and lo and behold, it's white. So sometimes these things are more easy than you would think. So what have you got here? We've got a complete list of all the users in this web shop and their passwords. We say, oh, that doesn't look like a password. It looks a bit odd. I would never have chosen it. True. Because there's one thing which the server has done quite cleverly, because all the passwords aren't just passwords which are in clear, but they were converted into a mathematical formula so that you don't store the passwords in clear in the database. So that was a good idea, because people said, well, if a hacker ever gets that, no hacker will manage to get back to the actual password. And in reality, it shouldn't work. It's true. In theory, at least, but let's see how that works in practice. There are lots of programs online that you can use for recalculating that mathematical formula and trace it back to an ordinary password, and you think you do it in 1 or 2 minutes. Anybody who believes that? Let's have a show of hands. Yes. So let's try this out. Just give you a hint. We've got 22 entries in the database. I'll let it run. Oh, there we are. First ones have appeared, so that was pretty quick. Of the 22 passwords, there you are, we've been able to find out those. Now, obviously, that's not all 22, because the better the password is, the longer it is, the more different characters, caps, small letters, special characters in different combinations, and the more complex it is, the longer it takes. And if you're taking a really, really secure password, I could leave the computer running for an hour, and you will find that probably wouldn't work it out. But I'll let it run until the end of the presentation. You see that, remember the last passwords that we found? Perhaps there'll be a few more. The basic statement here is certain passwords, like California, doesn't sound that bad. It's long, it's got a cap, but still it's something which can be detected very quickly. Now, and I'll hand back to my colleague, and as I say, I'll let this run in the background. Okay, so then we go back to the presentation, please, on the screen. And there we are. Thank you. So there are regular analyses which security companies are taking in order to look at what will happen, whether passwords can be found out. What's a typical passwords, what we find? I mean, what do people tend to use? What is the preferred password? You see here a hit list from the last year. I mean, seriously now, if I use that sort of password, I don't need a cryptographer to find that out, or any smart software that recalculates maths into password. I mean, that's something I can guess very quickly. I mean, something like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or password aren't any good anyway. Now, let's give you some statistical information. You can see here that the most popular password is actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 0.6% of all passwords are that range of figures. If you take the 25 most popular passwords, you will do pretty well in finding them out. Just imagine you've got the sort of user list we saw a moment ago. And I don't want to sort of get into one user, one specific person here. I want to get any user. So imagine you've got 100 users listed, maybe 1,000, and you've got a hit rate of 2.5%, and you can say with a pretty good certainty that you'll find your way into that system. Now, passwords, that's something that brings me to the second part, which is one of my favorite subjects, namely Google hacking. What do we mean by that? No, it's not that we break into Google. We will use Google as a search engine in order to detect gaps in the security of an application. I don't know what sort of companies you're working on, whether your company is maybe using SAP. We've used SAP as a sort of outstanding example, and we'll just explore what happens then. Lots of companies these days link their SAP system to the web, so that for suppliers, for customers, different functions are made available. And something which most people don't know is that all you need is to have type the right website into the browser to get straight into the SAP logging. Now, maybe you want to make forms available to your suppliers or your customers, but we may find more than that. So let's jump across to the live part again. Right. Google has one great advantage because we don't just use Google to find weak points. There's other things that could use for that, but to find systems that are open to attack. So vulnerable systems, you enter SAP, you find information about SAP. But Google can do more than that. Using Google, I can also get parts of URLs or certain content, protocols, for example. So what we would like to do now is to find open SAP systems which are available online. So if I enter that, I don't find SAP systems. I find information about SAP, the SAP stocks, and all that sort of thing. Doesn't help me much. So Google does offer me help. I can check the URLs. In other words, all the terms up here, I can use them to check for certain buzzwords. And if I use the SAP interface, I want to find that. Oh, it's already been suggested, so that makes it easy for me to find it. Then there's a little, oops, got a misspelling again. There we are, that's corrected. And suddenly I find pages which say log on, log in, and I just click on one of them. We're not hacking our way into that. I would like to make that clear. I just want to demonstrate the SAP systems can be reachable. What I'm doing now, I'm entering a test, so you can see it's nothing we've prepared as a screenshot. This is some SAP webpage. Thank God I didn't manage to get my way in right now. It could have happened. But what we see here is that there are lots of these systems that are simply systems you can reach online. And you've seen that from the password example. All I need is one bad password or one standard password to break into a system. So in other words, if I change any one of the passwords, or I'm good at guessing, I will get into the system because there's no such thing as perfect safeguards. And in most cases, that isn't absolutely a must, because if you read through the SAP documentation clearly, then you will find that even when installing SAP, certain user accounts are stored with standard passwords. So around about a handful of users can be seen with their password. So obviously, something like that is perfect for the trial and error, because it's always the same user accounts and always the same passwords that are being used. And if the company in question doesn't change those passwords, and it would be extremely easy to log into that system when you're online. Yes, it would be. Now I would like your attention to one little sentence, which hopefully you can remember. No switch to HTTPS, sending password, therefore unsafe. So remember that, because we come back to that at the end of the presentation. So SAP, that was one example, quite an interesting one. Something else that people sometimes ask us is, what about other systems? Not SAP, but some other systems you don't immediately think of. For example, it's about privacy or data protection, could be confidential meetings. So there could be webcams you can reach online. Not the usual sort of webcams, but some webcams in companies or showing a parking lot or something like that, which have access to the company. Google allows you to find that sort of thing brilliantly. Again, through parts of the URL. Here again, I've entered something here. View. And now let's have a look what we see here. Take the first one that came up. As I say, this is live. Oh, there we are. It works. So I find some webcams, and what is beautiful is these aren't just webcams. I can actually see who is parking there. Let's see whether this will work. Control. No. Well, let's take another one that we know would work more easily. If you really want to enjoy the winter, that's a nice example here. There you see this webcam. Could even be controlled, so I could look at something here. I mean, what is happening here with this webcam is something I do. I move that webcam to the left. And everything I want to show you is something where I'm going up. And I can tell you how beautifully you can zoom into certain bits of that picture. The resolution isn't all that good now, but just for you to see what is possible. So you could choose to go anywhere with that cam. You've got all sorts of options where the camera goes automatically. So why I'm telling you this is that if you have a webcam, quite frequently, if it isn't properly configured, you can get into it from the web. All you need is sometimes to know the IP address. It's not enough to have Stadtberg or something like that. You need to know the IP address. You may think it's difficult to find out an IP address because it's such a weird combination of figures, not something you can easily guess. But happily, the internet gives you all sorts of tips and tricks, like search engines, like Shoda. Yes, and I think when we're looking at the webcam example once again, then there are two dimensions to that. One is the sort of company-related area where I may have to think about, business espionage, hackers, attackers, maybe giving a chance to torpedo my own company. And there are other things that privately are important because I have lots of colleagues and friends in my community who use webcams at home to monitor the property, the house. And so this is one of the points where you should stop and think. Because whenever such IT systems are used in your own sort of grounds, you should really, really read all the documentation that comes with the gadget when you start.
Jetzt können Sie sagen Webcam.
Okay, well, you might say webcams, right? Okay. Maybe that's not so relevant to what we do in the company. But let's have a look at another search engine. We've just taken a look at Google, but there are now specialized search engines on the web for systems which visualize quite different things. Here we can see Shodan, which claims that it finds webcams, routers, power plants, iPhones, wind turbines, refrigerators, and VoIP phones. Now it gets tricky, especially as none of this is untrue. If you know exactly what you're looking for, you can use this search engine to access the control systems for webcams, routers, and even wind turbines. So for the live demo, we've picked out some systems like video conferencing. That's something we deal with day by day, and I'm sure if you work in hotels, you do too. A lot of you will offer meeting locations like this one. I'm quite sure that here at the Messe, there are a number of rooms where you can hold video conferences. And how to decompress, we will show now. Yes, we quite deliberately went for webcams and video conferencing systems because we didn't really want to attack a power plant. Perhaps this is the more harmless version. So what we're looking for with Shodan is a particular manufacturer of video conferencing systems, HDX, let's say. That works quite well. And this is the part that is a little less stable because it doesn't always work. But I'm going to try to access a conference room somewhere in the world. You can see these are video conference systems. Usually they are accessible. Okay, I can call there, I can put the phone down, I can even control to some extent. Let's try it. And this HDX 7000 systems aren't just any old systems, they come from Polycom. And probably most of you have seen them. These telephone spider systems, they're one of the leading manufacturers for systems of this kind. Okay, that one's busy. We don't know what's going to happen and what we're going to see in a minute. We always find this quite exciting too. Yes, occasionally we can get some nasty surprises while we're doing this. All right, not going anywhere. Yesterday I wrote an IP that does work. I'm going to try it now. I can't guarantee it, of course, that they're still online. You can see it's a video conference system, so there are visual data, image data being transmitted here, and we don't know whether our internet system is stable enough to deal with all this data. Okay, we'll try once more. We've recorded it all because I did want to make sure you saw it, whatever happened. Something else we have to say is that this is all very random. We're just looking on the off chance to see what's happening, which I suppose makes your chance of success a little bit lower. It's not at all comparable with if I am a hacker who's deliberately out there looking for companies to attack. And I know who I want to spy on, and I actually have some information on the system, then I have a lot more options. What we're doing here is really skimming the surface to see what are they handing to us on a plate. That's got nothing to do, of course, with the professionality of a targeted attack, because then you have other data, other weak points that you really know how to deal with. We're just looking for configurations here. That is public information on the web. And when we carry out analysis of this kind on behalf of our clients, of course, the customer will give us the target areas that they want us to check out for them. One example, for example, we have a company in the Black Forest, and we tested in the United States, and at 3 p.m., we accessed the video system in the USA, and we thought, why can't we see anything? It's dark. Obviously, there's a line free, a communication line, and then we realized it was night. And of course, as soon as we realized we were trying this at night, we realized there wasn't going to be a lot of communication going on in those rooms. And the perfidious thing is that we could have done this without people really noticing. The cameras are such that in cases of doubt, people don't even notice that they are under surveillance. With Polycom, you have these little black balls. There's a camera inside. And if they are installed the normal way, there isn't even a little lamp on if someone checks in from outside. So firstly, the fact that you can access what's going on without people knowing it is the one thing, but the fact that not even a lamp comes on when someone logs in is another thing. And so if there's an audio function, you can actually hear what's going on without the people in the room noticing that you are listening. We recorded this one yesterday because this is the surface I was playing around with just now, the interface. These are boats from a webcam. And if you zoom back, you can see that it's taken from one room. It's a conference room. This is just to show how far you can zoom in and out And it was absolutely clear. You could understand everything that was being spoken in the room next door. That's one. And then I think we can show this one as well again. You can look at flip charts and whiteboards and read what's on there. This is an attempt we carried out about a week ago. That's what it normally looks like. There you go. And here we are in the conference room. You can see you can actually move the camera, pan the room, and zoom in, zoom out. You'd think the people in the room would notice, wouldn't you, that they would hear it somehow. But no, people are having their conference in the room and they don't notice. And just take this awareness with you. In rooms where you see cameras, perhaps it's not a good idea if you leave your notes on the whiteboard. Take them with you, tidy up. Okay. Perhaps I'll just try one more live, but normally, no, not available. Okay. Then let's come back to the presentation. Here, these are the backup slides, all work beautifully. One of my favorite examples. Controlling an elevator, and this is a public transport provider. You can see buttons like stop, continue, and particularly nasty, if you want to do this, you can switch the camera on to see how people behave if the lift suddenly stops. Here is an excerpt which enables you to see very clearly how easy it is to enlarge these video conference systems. You can read the time on the clock. You can imagine that if you have confidential business data here on the table, it's so easy to zoom in and read that. Okay, one thing that affects all of us, at home, at work, and maybe this is something to take on board personally, is USB attacks. What we like doing to raise awareness among our company clients is you go into companies and then maybe in the canteen or in the toilets or some other public area, drop a USB stick or two. Leave them around. We've prepared those USB sticks beforehand, of course, so that if someone picks it up and puts it in their computer because they're curious, maybe they want to know what's on the USB stick. But anyway, if they put the stick in their computer, the USB stick tells us and says, hey, I've just been put into a computer. Which means that if we'd put something else on there, like a Trojan or a virus or some sort of malware, we would be in that computer. And these are things that we then present to the company in the debriefing so they can tell their staff that maybe it isn't such a good idea if you find a USB stick just to put it in your own computer. And these things, you read about them in the press, but people forget them quite quickly. Remember the Stuxnet case with the Iranian nuclear power plant? That was probably infiltrated by Americans and Israelis because there were probably technicians in the power plant who had taken contaminated USB sticks with them into the plant. We're normally talking about, normally in manufacturing, the manufacturing systems will be segregated from the IT systems. But if I can persuade somebody to take a stick into that other zone, then I'm in there. I think my partner's prepared something here to show you. Yes, we've got that. Okay, then let's switch over. Right, good that we've prepared that a bit. We recently came up with this new encryption system for USB systems, which means that these things don't work quite so well. But we've recorded this to show you how it works. This is a standard USB stick, and the nasty thing about these attacks is that with all these later versions, as a user, you don't even notice anything's happening. In the first generation, of course, normally the attack took place through simulation of a CD drive. So you'd put your stick in there, and you would see an auto-run dialog box. But these days, you don't need to do that anymore. And if we observe a bit what's happening, we have no user data. And you can see. Let's go into a closer view. You can see a notepad is opened using a keypad command. And this is an example where someone can add themselves in as a local user with administrator rights and can take control. There are various different typologies here. I think it's better to cover that in the presentation. Okay, then let's switch back to the presentation. One thing we have to be quite clear about, these USB attacks where maybe you pick up a virus, those are a thing of the past. These days we know that very targeted attacks are being carried out because people want entry into a particular company, and so the data that's on there will be absolutely relevant to the company or the zone they're trying to enter. And I can assure you that if you distribute 10, 20 USB sticks, 1 or 2 will reach their target. Yeah, okay, the different types. It began with the USB stick, which was just a normal removable disk and behaved like a CD drive, and you could exploit that to override the auto-run command. And once you'd started it up, you could then rewrite the whole menu so that whatever you chose on the menu, even if it was eject or close, it would have been infected. There would be malware in the background, and it would open up firewalls. A lot could be done this way. And the new generation of these devices can be influenced. You can see it here. This is a quite normal USB stick. And it reports in as a connected USB device, which doesn't sound terribly exciting, but that means that it's pretending to be some sort of a keypad. So Windows thinks that you have connected a keypad, and there are lots of things you can do with Windows. You can enter commands, you can do other keypad-related commands. Maybe people will be typing in passwords, and when the USB stick comes out, it's got all that information on it. I can see we're doing quite well for time, so let's add in our little special here. I don't know if anyone realized, but in the last few months it's been in the press. The owners and users of some Xerox scanners have been deeply unsettled. Yes, the security of scanners. The easiest way to demonstrate this is by giving you an example. This is copy documentation. This was placed on the device, then someone pressed a button, and the Xerox device scanned that piece of paper. And what came out of it was this. Now I'll give you a moment to look at that carefully. And those of you who are very attentive will have realized that 2 figures have been switched over. And it's struck me, or will strike some of you, because these were actually in order of magnitude, and all of a sudden there's a bigger figure here in the middle. There's another case here, the 60 and the 80. Down here you have a 6. That 6 has been properly reflected. So it went backwards and forwards for months, people complaining to the manufacturers and manufacturer looking into why it could happen. And then they found the guilty party, pattern matching. It's a technology which is used to save storage space. So me, as a normal user, probably have assumed in this example that if I scan a document, it will make an image of it, the entire document. But in fact, it doesn't. This scanner goes along and begins by scanning the upper area and says, ah, there's a 1. In this document, a 1 looks like this. Okay, so I'll store that as an image. The next one that comes along is another 1. And it says, ah, I know 1. I don't know the whole picture, don't need the whole image anymore. I just need to note this is another 1. And when I need a 1, I will use the old picture. That way, I can save an awful lot of storage space. You can imagine what happens if the copy I have isn't entirely clean. And here and there I have to think about, is that actually a 6 or is it perhaps an 8? And as a human being, I'm quite good at recognizing patterns. But the scanner is working with algorithms. And depending how those algorithms have been set up, it might have trouble deciding whether that's a 6 or 8. And then it says, okay, I'll go for the 8. And the problem is, unfortunately, that it happens with quite a lot of devices, that if you've got a rather fuzzy original, even if it's only slightly fuzzy or blurred, you can imagine what kind of errors that has led to. So this particular factor has been around for 8 years, and it's there in the standard devices. So if you do a standard installation, you will have had that problem. And imagine all the companies who have electronic invoice storage, for example, and suddenly have to start wondering whether the documents they've been scanning for the last 8 years have been correctly scanned or whether these errors are everywhere. So since I've known about this, I've always carried this little test paper with me so that whenever I'm confronted with a Xerox device, I test it first. So that's our advice. If you have any devices like that in this company, see if the patch has been installed, see if the error has been corrected, and make sure that the settings are correct. Okay, so this brings us to the last part of our demonstration, security of WLAN, wireless LAN networks. I'd like to demonstrate that maybe you shouldn't trust everybody, and what appears to be the case may not actually be the case. I'm looking at my colleague to see whether we have a few examples of that. Yes, we do. Fantastic. Most of you probably have brought your smartphone with you. A lot of you are probably often on the train, and you might use the wireless LAN network that Deutsche Telekom provides for train passengers in Germany. Now, you might have noticed, your smartphone might have noticed, but for the last few minutes, there's been a new wireless LAN network available here, Telekom EC. And I can see from the screen that some smartphones here actually think they're on an express train in Germany. Now, I don't know about you, looking around, I don't think any of us are sitting on an express train in Germany, but okay. Nevertheless, we now have about 20 smartphones that have connected to this wireless LAN network on this express train. So if your smartphone has logged into that, I would suggest you surf now, browse a few websites, look at Bahn.de, for example, and you will see that although you're actually Googling Spiegel TV, you're going to find this instead, which we put there. The risks I'm trying to illustrate for you are that this access point is up here. We switched it on, and it's linked to our laptop. So all of you that are linked into our wireless LAN network and are using that to go online, all your data is running through our systems. So we can read what you are sending over the web. And now we'll come back to the point that Mr. Kohlar mentioned before. You could make our lives a lot harder if you used encryption. For example, when browsing on the web, you make sure that you are only using encrypted connections. You can recognize it from this padlock here, this icon in the browser, and smartphones also have ways of recognizing this. So we haven't done anything that bad, really, apart from diverted all your web traffic onto our server, and we will analyze it later on. I'd like to pick up on something that my colleague said here last year when he reported about security studies that were carried out during the Olympic Games in Sochi, which showed that as soon as anyone tried in a hotel or in a public zone to log into public wireless LAN, there were massive attacks on laptops and smartphones because attempts were being made by hackers to install malware on those devices. You can check this out if you like. All we're doing is diverting that data onto our website. Feel free, there's no password. You can log into this telecom wireless network. You're welcome to log in, and we can show you the list. Just to give you an idea, a little list of the people who've logged in. Oh, there's quite a few now. Some of you might recognize yourselves there. And I just said hackers love this kind of data so they can install malware on your devices. But we wouldn't do that, would we? Thank you very much.
Ja, gibt es noch Fragen von Ihnen?
Are there any questions from you? Because the two of us will probably stick around here for a little bit after this session if you want to have a one-to-one session with us. But if there are any public questions, feel free to put them now. No, they're all stunned. Okay, I can see not immediately, and maybe some of the reservations that you might have come up with in the meantime, you might prefer to discuss personally with us. Yes, thank you very much.